segment. I want to start this segment by saying, I don't even know how to start this segment. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a depressing segment. If you're not capable of handling depression, or something that could be extremely depressing, I suggest not watching. So with that being said, let's jump in. So we got some polling data on how younger people feel about the United States. Young adults are dying from suicide and homicide at the highest rates in decades, CDC report says. As we see on this thumbnail, nearly 3 in 5 teen girls in the U.S. felt persistently sad or hopeless. Now, I would like to say that I speak on behalf of people that are persistently sad or hopeless, because I am persistently sad and hopeless, right? That's pretty much what my show is about at this point, for better or for worse. So let's check this out. In 2021, suicide and homicide rates for children and young adults aged 10 to 24 in the U.S. were the highest they've been in decades. According to a new report from the U.S. CDC, suicide and homicide were the second and third leading causes of death for this age group, both causing 11 deaths for every 100,000 people aged 10 to 24. Now, I just want to say this. It's a wide age range, 10 to 24, okay? A 24-year-old could kill themselves for a completely different reason than an 11-year-old. Right? If an 11-year-old is killing themselves, look at the parents. I also want to say that for 24-year-olds. If someone is so young and so persistently sad that they're planning suicide, look at the parents. Now, I don't want to sit here and say every single parent who has a suicidal child is to blame, right? I don't want to say that, but I'm going to. If you are a parent and your child is suicidal, that's your job to fix that shit. Now, again, in our society, we've kind of pathologized suicide. We've kind of pathologized depression, to make parents feel better. This is all to make parents feel better. Some people will say, oh, they're just sick. Oh, something's wrong with them. You did everything you could. That's what people tell each other during support groups to cope. Now, am I saying that every single suicide is a result of bad parenting? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is every single suicide, the parents probably could have been better parents. Because I don't really believe in the idea that a parent can exist in the United States of America without abusing their kid to some degree. It's part of the American DNA. Now, how much you resist that urge to destroy your kid's soul and livelihood, that's up to you, and there's a lot of great parents that do that. But the default in our society, the default is for parents to pass along the traumas to their kids. And in a situation where society is ever collapsing, right, the family unit itself is forever collapsing. And everyone's looking for a scapegoat. Is it capitalism that's causing people to kill themselves in droves? Yeah, sure. Is it family abuse that's causing people to kill themselves in droves? Absolutely, probably. Is it chronic health conditions? No one is able to live their lives healthily anymore. People are chronically ill. It's hard to just get up in the morning sometimes with all the illness and death and sickness circulating in the air. So, yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why, young people, kids, 11-year-olds are counted here. Why would an 11-year-old kill themselves? I'm asking you this question. Okay? Why the fuck would an 11-year-old kill themselves? The only option, the way I see it, is parenting. Now we can have an argument why, a 22-year-old, they're an adult now, they should, whatever, but we can have that debate, but the only reason an 11-year-old would ever think of killing themselves is because of shitty parents. I just want to be 100% about that one. Now, we can debate what the age cutoff would be, where someone has their own sort of thing, where it's like maybe even possible that they were just sick is an excuse that you could use. Usually, right? Usually, when people are just sick, or we did all we could, it's because they were abused from a young age and they were not equipped to properly handle the world at large. And then they became an adult. They realized they weren't equipped to do so. They were never taught how to handle the world. And then they kill themselves later than an 11-year-old. I don't know, man. I just want to say this. If you have an 11-year-old that kills themselves, it's your fault. Full stop. I don't give a fuck. Okay? If it's they kill themselves with a gun on accident, your fucking fault. If they walk into traffic, it's your fucking fault. I'm sorry. If an 11-year-old is killing themselves for any reason, it's the parents' fault. That's just my opinion. Now, what you can do with that information, I don't know. This is going to be a long segment, by the way, so just put your seatbelt on. I know I offend certain demographics in my audience here sometimes, but it wouldn't be an above-it-all show if I didn't offend somebody. All right, let's keep going. Suicide rates surpassed homicide rates for the age group in 2010 and have continued rising in the past decade. A large spike in homicide rates during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic brought the rates for both types of violent death together for the first time in a decade. For children ages 10 to 14, a large gap remained. The suicide rate in 2021 was twice as high as the homicide rate. We're talking about children, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds killing themselves. I mean, again, I'm telling you this as a matter of fact, okay? There is not a single 13-year-old that is killing themselves for any other reason than the fact that their parents fucking suck. I don't know what to tell you. There is not a single, oh, you got bullied at school? Okay. Well, if you had parents that were willing to be there for you and support you, maybe you wouldn't feel the need to internalize the bullying. Maybe if you had a parental support structure that you could go to in your time of crisis that would actually be willing to help you, maybe you wouldn't have killed yourself. Because again, one of the American ways that we raise our children in this country is we teach parents to neglect their children. We teach parents to discipline their kids from a young age in this country. What happens when you raise a child in this country? What happens is you have a bunch of people tell you, you got to draw boundaries, right? Oh, the kid's crying in the middle of the night, stuff them in another room. I don't know how many parents are watching me. I'm sure I know I have a couple parents out there. And hey, I know it could be an offensive show to hear this, but I don't know, man. Just whenever I see a crying baby being thrown into another room, because I know people. I have people in my family that are parents and they have babies. And the baby starts crying, and what do? They throw him in a fucking other room, and they just keep crying. Like, that's fucking crazy. That's fucking crazy. You don't think that fucks a kid up? You don't think we all say this, oh, the kid's brains are like a sponge. You ever hear this in school? Like a sponge. Oh, the kids are absorbing everything around them. You don't think that a 1-year-old being shoved in a closet because they're crying is going to fuck them up? And again, I know, I'm not saying that it's like all the parents' fault. Yeah, society fucking sucks, and we force people to go back to work a week after giving birth. That's not natural. To give birth to a child and then just abandon them in a week? That's not fucking natural. When did that even start? Like 100 years ago? That it became normal to give birth to a child and abandon them in a week? Because that's how a child interprets it, by the way. That's how a child interprets when their family is not there for them, when they're in daycare, or when they have different kinds of babysitters, that rotate in and out and they can never build a connection. That's how the child interprets it as abandonment. I was abandoned. A kid doesn't know that the parents have to go to work. They're a fucking baby. How the fuck are they going to know that? Right? And so from a young age, we essentially have normalized torturing our offspring in this country. It's a societal norm. Right? It is almost an unavoidable consequence of having a kid is that you torture them. Right? That's just part of being an American. Now, the only possible exceptions are if you're wealthy enough to avoid having both parents have to be at work. Or maybe you're lucky and both parents work from home. But again, this is all psychological, emotional torture of children. And again, I say this as someone who was psychologically and emotionally tortured as a child. I say this as someone whose first suicide attempt was at the ripe old age of 15 years old. I've tried to kill myself several times in my life. Why? Because I had nowhere to go. I had no people in my life that cared about me. My family didn't care about me. I had no friends. The school system didn't care about me. No one gave a fuck about me. I had chronic health conditions. The medical industry didn't do anything to fix it. I thought about killing myself. Now, fortunately for y'all, so that I can pester your ears off every morning, I failed. But again, we need to talk about, and I know it's a difficult conversation, but when you have a child in the U.S., you are signing up. You are signing a document that says, I accept that I am going to bring upon this earth another soul that I am going to participate in destroying. Because again, if you now I just want to be very clear with you, okay? If you actually had a child and you actually wanted that child to have a beautiful and great life, would you really have a kid in the USA? Think about it. Think about it. You want to have a happy, healthy family? In the fucking United States, it's impossible. So the way I see it, having a kid in the United States, especially now we can debate going back, because again, millennials are the first generation that have been statistically proven to be at a worse position than their parents. So we can have a debate. You had a kid 15 years ago, 20 years ago. That's a different conversation. The signs of the times weren't looking as bleak at that point. Okay? But if you're having a kid now, in 2023, I mean, I'm sorry, man. Like, I really hope that, I don't know, man. I'm just, like, I don't want to say anything too mean, but I hope that kid doesn't actually happen, because the way I see it, it is impossible to raise a child without abusing them in the United States. It's just impossible. It's just a fucking impossible. And again, we have a giant epidemic of 11-year-olds killing themselves. There's a fucking problem here. And you know what the problem is? No one wants to look at parents. That's the fucking problem. Everyone wants to blame the government. Oh, it's the government's fault. The government. Everyone wants to blame society. Oh, it's society's fault. Now, again, it is. These are all contributing factors. But one major piece of the puzzle that you see this nowhere. You're not going to see this on mainstream news. You're not going to see this on independent news. You will see this nowhere. Everyone will always, oh, the parents, oh, they had it rough. Oh, the parents, they did the best they could. Have you ever heard that? Maybe you've said it to yourself about your own childhood. My parents did the best they could. You ever think about that? My parents did the best they could. Think about it. What is that? What are you saying to yourself and to others, potentially? What is the legal equivalent to my parents did the best they could? It's the insanity defense. That's what you're saying. When you say that your parents did the best that they could, you are saying that your parents fucked you up, but it's okay because they're fucking insane. That is the legal, right? The legal equivalent is the insanity defense. my parents did the best they could. Chances are I'm going to sit here and tell you that most parents did not do the best that they could. Now, we can have a conversation about how difficult it is being a parent. That's not my show. If you want to go watch a show where people have a pity party about, oh, I decided to have a kid and now my life is so hard, go watch another show. That's fine. My show is not that. Okay? And so I want to say this. As someone who tried to kill myself when I was very young, there are a confluence of factors. One of them, I was bullied in school. All right? So now imagine I had two parents that loved me, and I could go to them with my problems. Well, boom, I would be good to go. But I didn't. I had two parents that did not live together, and they played psychological warfare about me, right? So I felt uncomfortable to talk to either of them, because if I talked to either of them about my problems, what would they do? They would go call the other one on the phone and start a fucking multi-month long argument about it, about, oh, you're not doing this enough and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, they're both being abusive. And why are they doing this? Why is it that they're both on the phone constantly playing the blame game? It's because the natural instinct of parents in the US is that it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. No, it's your fault. And when you see like a divorced couple or whatever in this kind of, my parents never got married, so they couldn't have gotten divorced. But when you see that kind of stuff play out, what is it? It's not me. It's not, I would never do something evil. It's not me. It's you. It's someone else. It's society. It's, oh, my kid had a chemical imbalance. My kid was sick. Nothing I could have done could have been any help. My kid was just sick. That's what we tell ourselves in society. That's what parents tell themselves anyway. And so again, whether or not you think I'm 100% accurate, whether or not you think I'm dead the fuck on, you have to admit that this is a conversation you're not allowed to have in the US. You're not allowed to have this conversation. You ever see people go out there, look at me, I'm so counterculture. Look at me. You ever see these people that are saying all this fucking cringy shit on the internet about how counterculture they are? Now, I want to tell you something that's counterculture. Talking about the fucking disgusting cult-like mentality of the family unit in the United States of America. Okay? Because that's ultimately what it is. Right? Parents have such immense power that I don't believe should be possible. I don't believe in the family unit. I personally think, now again, we can have this debate. I recognize that this is something that many people may have not even heard before, but I'm willing to debate this, okay? So maybe I can present this in a harsh way and maybe we can reach a middle ground. But I'm willing to say that having a two-person family unit is inherently abusive. That's what I'm willing to say. I'm willing to say that if you only have two parents and those two parents are placed above everyone else on a hierarchy, that they have the ultimate authority over that child, that is an inherently abusive relationship. Inherently, intrinsically, by its very nature, an abusive relationship. Now, again, am I saying that necessarily all parents that have kids are inherently abusive? To some degree, by having a child in society, you consent to sign up for that abuse. But, again, there's certain levels of like what we can and cannot do in our society, what we're able to do. But you ever hear the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child? Because it does. All throughout our development as a species, we were raised by communities. We weren't raised by two parents that had to juggle 3 jobs. And we weren't raised by a nanny who didn't give a fuck about us, who was too busy abandoning their own kids for a couple of extra money so that they could watch your bitch ass. We weren't raised by this fucking disgusting, stressful environment. So I say this, yes, it is society's fault. But when you become a parent, you sign up to participate in the experiment. So, again, we can play the blame game. We can play the cope game. It's not my fault. My kid's sick. It's their fault. It's your fault. It's this person's fault. It's the bully's fault. It's the school system's fault. It's blah, blah, blah. We can play the blame game all we want. But at the end of the day, when you have a kid in the United States of America, you are signing up for the game that results in this that we're talking about. Now again, so what would happen in an alternate world where the parental structure is the most situation where that's the cause of suicide, depression in young people? Well, theoretically, what if we had a society where the family unit is a fail? It's abusive. So the parent goes to the teacher and the teacher actually helps them. Or society actually helps them. Because when you're a kid, think about it. And I've said this before. You don't have an independent, objective view of reality. You do not live in reality when you are a kid. You live in the world that is shaped by the authority figures in your life, which could be role models on TV or whatever. It could be a teacher, but most often it's parents. Sometimes it's older siblings. They shape a child's reality, right? And so it's almost impossible for children to even know that they're being abused in most cases. The natural reaction of being an abused child is disassociation. I don't know if it's disassociation or dissociation. I'm not sure if there's an A in there. I'm not a doctor, so bear with me. And so what happens when a child dissociates is they stop recording the memories. I have a question for people in my audience. Do you remember your childhood? Like, I'm talking about, like, every year of your life from, like, the age of 3 onward. Do you have, like, distinct memories? Every single holidays, every birthday you have? Like, do you have these memories? I don't. I don't remember fucking 10 years of my life, going on 15 years of my life. I don't remember any of it. Why? Probably because I dissociated the whole time because I was living in a fucked up situation, right? So, again, parents have the ultimate authority to shape their children's worldview. And when you have that position in life, when you have that authority over a child, that child is less likely to even know how to ask for help. And that's the other thing. So again, let's imagine we even had a society that was willing to offer serious help, which we don't. We live in a society of gaslighting. Oh, we'll help you, they say, but they're just going to send you to a foster home where you're going to get raped and molested in the foster home. And if you're lucky, you know, like the fucking game with the crane, you know, and the stuffed animals in the arcades, right? If you're lucky, some crazy Christians are going to adopt you, and then they're probably going to throw you into an indoctrination camp that you're going to get molested by a clergy anyway. So society really isn't there to help you at all. They don't give a shit about you, right? In a lot of instances, parents don't give a shit about you. So again, if we lived in a society where one of these things was able to be escaped to, it would still be a shitty society. But again, we live in a situation where school systems don't fucking give a shit about you. We live in a society where healthcare systems don't give a fucking shit about you. Society at large doesn't give a fuck about you. Orphanages, foster care, they don't give a fuck about you. And in a lot of instances, your parents don't give a fuck about you. So what the fuck are you gonna do? Your peers don't give a fuck about you. You have no friends. You have no one to turn to. You have no family members. Is it any wonder why kids are killing themselves? Think about it. Now, I want to keep going because, again, this is something I'm very passionate about. And also, no one else will talk about this in this field. I'm sure that many people watching me, I know I've seen a dip in my viewership over the last 5 minutes. That, to me, that's a sign of success. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that I may be the only person that gives this tough on parents perspective. And I just want to be clear. I'm not saying all parents are evil. I'm not saying every parent is inherently abusive just by nature of being a parent. But what I am trying to do is provide to you a perspective that it is impossible for you to see anywhere else. You don't see this on TV. You don't see this in political debates. You don't see this on the radio. You don't hear this anywhere else. You may hear it on some other, you know, small YouTubers, or maybe you might hear it interpersonally. You might hear it in some, but you don't see this on news. You don't see this in large channels. They're not going to do tough on parents. Why? Because most people are parents. They don't want to fucking alienate their audience. Right? So again, I just want to be very clear that this all boils down to, again, my parents did the best they could is the insanity defense. And if your best defense of parents is that they're fucking insane, I don't know, man. That's pretty silly. But let's keep going. Earlier research has found that there's been a steady increase in the number of children who have seen in emergency rooms for suicidal thoughts. Now that's another one. Going to the emergency room. This is what our society does. A kid says that they have plans or thoughts of suicide. What do? We call strangers to come help us. I have a question. Right? If you had a genuine relationship with your child that was built on love, trust, etc., and if your kid came to you in a time of need saying that they had thoughts of suicide, would you feel the need to call strangers to come lock them in a fucking bed against their will? Usually in some instances they handcuff them to the bed. If you had an actual, genuine, caring relationship, well, chances are if you had a genuine, caring relationship with your child, they wouldn't be in that position to begin with. But, again, isn't it weird that as a society, oh, our kid seems a little sad, let's call a bunch of strangers to help the situation? Isn't that a little strange? I don't know. To me, that's weird. I see that as weird. I don't know. That's just me, though. That's just me. Another CDC report said that the rate of suspected suicides and suicide attempts by poisoning among the young, young adults, whatever, surged during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially among children aged 10 to 12. A 70% increase in suicide attempts between 10 and 12 years old. I'm telling you, as a matter of fact, there is no other reason other than emotional, psychological, and or physical abuse or neglect that a fucking 10-year-old is going to try to poison themselves to death. A 10-year-old doesn't even really understand what suicide is. A 10-year-old doesn't even understand what life is. Once again, 10-year-olds, they don't live in the real world. They don't live in reality. They live in a world that's shaped by the authority figures in their lives, typically their parents. Oftentimes now you see 10-year-olds having the world shaped by TikTok and YouTube influencers because the parents aren't there. They're at work or they're divorced. So again, the only way that a 10-year-old is even going to think about suicide is shitty parents. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's the... do not pass go, do not collect $200. That's it. That's the end of the line. If you have a 10-year-old who has thoughts of suicide, you have failed as a parent. Your kid's sick, yes, and you're the one who gave them the sickness because you fucked up. Now, there are some parents that would hear that and go, it's not my fault, my kid's sick, oh my God, it's not my fault, I didn't do it. And they live in this fantasy world of their own creation. But there's also some parents that would hear their kids say these things or find their kid doing this, and then that would be the wake-up call. The moment where they realize, holy fuck, I need to get my shit together. Now, I wish that more parents had that. That feeling, that wake-up call, but they don't. Most parents, they might claim it's a wake-up call, and then 3 months later, they're back to their typical antics. Let's keep going here. Teens aged 15 to 19, the homicide rate remained higher than the suicide rate, according to the new report. Now, again, I ask you a question. Why would a teenager be more willing to inflict violence on others than themselves? Why? Well, look at American society. We give teenagers guns. Have fun hunting, Jack. We give 12-year-olds guns and train them to shoot deer. And then they know how to shoot guns. And they have guns. And also, they can use those guns on people that make them mad at school. And why would they feel the need to kill other people or inflict violence on other people? Probably because the parents aren't there to help them. Again, it goes down to neglect, emotional, physical, psychological abuse. What is neglect? Is emotional and psychological abuse. That's what it is. A child fundamentally needs to be in a community, needs to be close to their parents, their family system, the people around them. And if they're not, if they're constantly left alone, if they're constantly left in the care of rotating babysitters, constantly has no parental contact, they're going to feel a little distant. It's just how it goes. That's just the world we live in. And when you have a kid in this world, you sign up for it. You're signing the consent form for this when you have a child in this country. So don't give me this whole, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. You had the kid. Last year, a study reported that firearms were the most common weapon used in children's death, and black boys were killed more than any other group. In 2020, guns surpassed car accidents as the leading cause of death for children and teens. Firearms accounted for nearly 1 in 5 childhood deaths in 2021. So again, whenever you hear people in this world talk about, oh, it's for the children, it's for the children, oh, we do it for the children, no one gives a shit about the children. And now I'm going to sit here and tell you this, and this may sound like I'm too full of myself, whatever, but hey, sometimes people need a shock to their system. But I am willing to bet you that I care more about kids than the average parent in the United States. I'm willing to bet you on that. Now, I say this I don't want to have kids. I'm afraid to have kids. I don't want to have a kid and then fuck my kid up and have to live with the guilt and shame for the rest of my life. Jesus Christ. I don't know why anyone would sign up for that unless they're bored and they have no hobbies and they don't know what else to do with their lives. But I'm just a little humor there. But I'm willing to suggest that most parents only have kids because of narcissism and they're just not bright. They don't have anything else going for them. Why? Think about it. When you're a child, right, what is the script that you're indoctrinated with in school? What is the script? Right? The script is, what are you going to be when you get older? The script is, oh, you just got to start going on dates. You got to get married. You got to have kids. You got to get a house, white picket fence, all this stuff. That's what they indoctrinate you with in school. Is they teach you the script that you follow so that you don't ever actually live your own life. Just think about where you are in your world right now, where you are and how you got here in your life. Most people, they follow the script that's told to them and taught to them and trained into them when they're extremely young. And I say this. Now, again, you can make your own path and somehow manage to find a way where you, at the end of the day, follow the script in some way, but at least you forged your own path. Most people, when they have children, they're not doing that. They're just following the script that they were taught when they were young. Is you grow up, you get a crush on the cute boys, then you kiss them, then you date them, then you fuck them, then you marry them, then you procreate, and then you die of old age. That's how the script goes. That's what we indoctrinate our kids into doing. And most people, they don't really deviate from that too much. And so when most people arrive at the having kids portion of the script, they didn't train, they didn't practice, they didn't read books on, they didn't study in what to do when they got there. They just, at some point, woke up and boom, now I'm a parent. And then there's other people that only have kids because of narcissism. I want to pass on my legacy. Some people only have kids because they like the idea of passing on the traumatic things that they had to go through when they were young onto their kids. Repeat the cycle. Oh, my parents beat me, so it's okay that I beat you? Why are you crying? My parents put me in the corner, so I can do that too. You ever see this? You ever see parents, when asked about their abusive tactics, say, well, when I was a kid? You ever see that? You see this a lot when it comes to spanking, which, by the way, Why the fuck? I view this. If you spank a child, you should be put on the sex offender registry. That's some fucked up shit. When you're spanking a child, to me, do not pass go, sex offender? Sex offender. Why the fuck are we spanking kids? And oftentimes the defense is, well, my daddy used to hit me. And why is that? Because these people, they're following the script. They're programmed. They're not thinking humans. Now again, has anyone ever played the video game The Sims? What is The Sims? Well, what you can do in The Sims is you create characters and you give them jobs and you play house. It's essentially playing house with dolls, but in video game form. But one thing that you can do in The Sims is it's called autopilot mode. You can just let them do whatever they want. Let them follow the script. And that's most people in this country. Most people do not actually achieve consciousness in this country. What is consciousness? It's the ability to become self-aware. It's the ability to actually take in the world around you for what it is. It's the ability to have an independent perspective. It's the ability to have an objective, or at least objective compared to the subjective experiences, because we all have subjectivity because we're human. But again, to break from the subjective experiences of reality that were taught to you from a young age. That is what it is to be conscious in this country. And most people are not. Most humans are not even in America, but most human beings are not even at the point where they have achieved true consciousness, the ability to make their own decisions. Most people get indoctrinated with the script when they're of very young ages. And most people that don't follow these scripts are the people that end up killing themselves because they see that there is no light at the end of the tunnel. So anyway, all of this is to say that yes, society is to blame, our government is to blame, politicians are to blame, but this is something that other people aren't going to say, and this is the elephant in the room, is that parents are to blame. Because it is normal in our world to traumatize your child. It is the default. It is when you get that new car and whatever radio station is the one that the manufacturer is set to, that is traumatizing your child. It's the default. It's the norm. It requires extensive training. It requires extensive practice to not abuse your child in this country. Because again, what do? When we have kids, we're forced to abandon them and go back to work. That's abuse. If you go back to work within, 5 to 10 years after your child is born, you're abusing them. Now again, we can play the blame game and all this and that, but again, at the end of the day, you sign the consent form. You signed the form, I hereby consent to have a mandatory medical experiment be applied to my child against my will, except for this fact that I'm signing this consent form, right? So again, I don't know. But one thing I do know is that as a society, people are afraid to look inward. People are afraid to blame the parents. People are afraid to blame their own parents. People are afraid to blame themselves. People are afraid to take any and all responsibility. And again, I say this as a child that had two parents that didn't live together. Whenever I would confide in either one of them, it was ammo for their fucking warfare on the phone. You're fucking up my kid. No, you're fucking up my kid. No, you're fucking up my kid. And what did I learn? I learned I can't confide in either of them because neither of them give a fuck about me. They only care about themselves, right? And that's most parents in this country. To be honest with you, I've talked to a lot of people. I've seen parents. I know people in my family that are parents, and I'm seeing the cycles of abuse just carry on. I see people that are in my age range. I'm 27 years old. There are people that are 27 that have kids, and I see them abusing their kids in the same way that I was abused as a kid. It's normal to abuse your child in this world. That's just what it is. Now, a lot of people want to say, oh, it's single parents. People want to say, oh, they blame the fathers for leaving. They blame the mothers, whatever. Single parents. I say this again. Two-parent families, I still think, is inherently abusive. Two parents isn't enough to raise a kid, especially not in the modern-day society, right? Again, you may have heard the phrase, it takes a village, but where did that come from? It came from hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution is where that motherfucking shit came from. And now, over the last 50 to 100 years, all of a sudden we've shifted it up, and now we're confused as to why kids are killing themselves? We're confused? But anyway, again, you don't see this perspective very often in media.